for the Chamber's third installment in the Tips from Our Experts webinar series. My name is Michelle Kreutzer. I'm the Executive Director with the Pittsburgh Airport Area Chamber. Also, Susan Havanek, our Member Engagement Specialist, is here with us today to help with today's program. Like I said, we're very excited you are joining us. We've got about 25, 30 people today, and I know you're all looking forward to hearing more about how you can produce those engaging virtual presentations that we're all doing these days. So with that, I'm going to introduce our speaker. I'm extremely excited to introduce Jeff Tatusko, who is Technical Training Manager at New Horizons Computer Learning Centers in Pittsburgh. Jeff's career in teaching began in the normal place, a call center. He would have been happy simply taking call after call in this 24/7 public safety center, but somehow managers decided it must have been too easy for him and wanted to give him more of a challenge. So they asked him to show others how to take calls. He quickly realized that it was something he could get used to, so he settled in. Once again, however, upper management felt the need to give him more responsibility and promoted him to training supervisor, doing the same thing, but helping to run the call center in the meantime. Management soon tired of promoting him to standard positions, so they tried something different, giving him a job that nobody else had had before and letting him figure it out on his own. Thus was born the quality management supervisor position, and Jeff tried to get comfortable. The powers that be saw this and believed what he really needed was more responsibility. So they put him in charge of the entire center. He was content for 5 years when again, the company decided he needed more. He then was cast as a corporate manager for the budding technology known as online ticketing. After happily working there for 15 years, he was thanked by being let go 1 month before closing for good. Happy as he was to do nothing, the lack of income forced him back into the job market, and the New Horizons Pittsburgh training manager found him to be a good fit. That was 5 years ago. Since then, he's learned and taught apps classes and moving on once again to also teach some text classes. So thank you, Jeff, for being here with us today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you now.
Thank you very much, Michelle, for those kind words. My apologies for everybody to having to actually listen to my whole bio. But anyway, I'd like to welcome you all to the session today. My name is Jeff Tatusko, as Michelle said. Again, I am the training manager for the technical trainers for New Horizons Computer Learning Centers. We are based in Green Tree. So if you ever have any questions or issues related to concerns about training on computers, hey, let us know. We're more than happy to help you. So today, what am I talking about? This is going to be a little bit of a presentation, just kind of going through and talking a little bit about virtual presentations. I've been doing this for a lot of years now, and people come in and they look at this and they say, how can I do this? How can I go ahead and make my presentations a little bit more user-friendly so that I'm not putting my audience to sleep? Well, there's a lot of different things that we can go ahead and do. And we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about how that's going to take place here. So let me go ahead and just, like I said, talk a little bit about some of the things that I want to talk about over the next half hour or so. The first thing that's going to be most important is making sure you understand your topic. If you don't understand what's going on with everything, you're going to run into problems, you're going to end up stuttering, and you're going to end up losing your audience. So we'll talk a little bit about how you're going to be able to work with that. We're also going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the tools that you're going to be able to use in your presentations. Obviously, one of them is going to be PowerPoint. We'll show you how you can go ahead and use that in a variety of different ways and not just your standard, here's your bland template. We'll show you a couple of different features that you can work with in that regard. Just because you're presenting information doesn't mean that people don't want to come away with some sort of parting gift. So one of the things that you can do is you can make sure that you have the ability to share out some of the information so that they can access it later on. Once again, we'll show you some of the tools that are associated with that. And then finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the different platforms that people use and some of the different tools that are associated with those platforms. Again, just some different opportunities to kind of go in here and see that. Now, before I go ahead and get too far involved with this, it's always nice to make sure that people can hear me. So can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Then we will go ahead and get started and we'll see what kind of trouble we can get into. So as I mentioned, when you are going in and you're giving some an online presentation. There are certain things that you really, really need to do to make sure that everything is going to run as smoothly as possible. One of the most important things, as I mentioned, is making sure that you understand exactly what you're going to be talking about. That very well may seem like a very obvious top thing to think about, but there's a lot of different things that may pop up, especially if you have to give your presentations more than once. If you're giving a presentation over and over and over again, you think about it, a lot of the your companies have to deal with all kinds of people. You may not necessarily want to build a brand new presentation for each one, so you have to make sure you understand exactly what you're talking about. So make sure that you review all of your information before you get started. If you go into a presentation and you think, oh, wait a second, there was some detail I was supposed to remember, that's going to show up on your presentation, and that's going to show that maybe people don't really understand what you want to talk about, and they're not going to get what you're trying to get for them. Another key piece of information along those same lines: what's changed since you gave this presentation last? You know, as you go through, you're going to realize that a lot of different things and technologies, they change constantly. One of the things that we've run into with a couple of our instructors is that, for example, we use Teams as a platform to go ahead and share out our information and communicate back and forth. There's a lot of other things that we do. I don't know if you're aware of this or not. Microsoft changes things a lot. And the more they change things, the harder it is for everybody to make sure that they're keeping up on everything. So, for example, you may go in one day and you're ready to give your presentation on how to deliver a specific concept or trying to sell something, and then all of a sudden somebody's gone in and changed something, and somebody looks at it and says, hey, what's that? And you look at it and say, I don't know. I've never seen it before. It doesn't really give you a lot or lend a lot of confidence to the attendee to know that you really understand the entire product or understand what you're trying to do. So it's very, very important that you make sure that you have all the tools and everything set up before your presentation begins. Also, think about who you are going to be giving your presentation to. Is this going to be a series of CEOs who completely expect everything down to the detail? Is this going to be a group of IT departments who are really not necessarily interested in sales or anything like that, but they want to know exactly what kind of products are coming in or what kind of changes are taking place? There's a lot of different things that you have to make sure that you understand what they need. And why are you giving this presentation? What are they going to be able to get out of this? And what exactly are they going to be interested in once you're done with it? Is there something that maybe you're trying to sell a specific product, or maybe you're trying to advertise a specific business, and all of a sudden somebody comes in with a brand new question that says, hey, what if I need X and you're selling Y? Well, there's a lot of different things that you can go ahead and do to make sure that you go from X to Y and kind of make it a smooth transition. Okay. As I mentioned, as you're going through this, you want to make sure that people realize that this presentation that you're giving is important to them. One of the key things that people realize when they go into an online presentation: why are you taking the online presentation? Because I have to. Well, don't necessarily make them think that they're there because they have to be there. Make them feel like it's something that's really going to benefit them. And the more you're able to do that, the more luck you're going to have to get all of your information through. Another key thing, this is going to seem incredibly strange for everybody, because most of you have been working from home lately. You understand the concepts of, working from home and maybe being on camera, and you think, oh man, I don't want to have to do this. And if you think about it, everybody hears stories about, well, okay, I'm able to work in my jammies. So if you're going into a presentation full of CEOs, you may look fine. I mean, yes, I'm wearing a shirt and tie today, but trust me, I'm professionally dressed. If you go into a presentation and you're really not mentally prepared for it, you're going to have problems, okay? Because if you're going in, you may have, like I said, I may have a shirt and tie on, but if I had PJs and bunny slippers on, I really wouldn't feel like I was in the mood to go ahead and give a presentation like this. The more business like you are in this area, the better off you're going to be. So make sure that when you're giving an online presentation, treat it like you're going to work. Treat it like you are at work, because the more you do that, the more comfortable you're going to be in your work environment and not just treating it like being at home. Okay. We've talked a little bit about how you're going to have a variety of different tools that you can go ahead and use when you're giving your presentation. The most obvious that most people want to be able to use is PowerPoint. Okay, it is a standard presentation tool. It's going to give you the opportunity to go ahead and display out a lot of different types of information and put it in a way that's going to be at least a little bit visually pleasing. Now, having said that, there are certain limitations that a lot of people run into when you do something like this. For example, when you go into PowerPoint, how many, if you think about it, and you should, I thought maybe you'd have like a hands up or a thumbs up kind of option there. How many of you have a company template that you have to follow for presentation after presentation after presentation? You know, the more you get to use that, the more it just kind of gets a little bit dull. And it's a little bit of a limitation simply because you're stuck with, you can't put up like an ocean background like I have here. Now, is it a requirement that you have an ocean background? No, your company has it set up so that they want everything to be uniform. It just kind of sometimes feels a little bit off because it may not necessarily be what you want to do. And you can get around that simply by going in and working with the same kind of options. Another thing, and this is another one of those things that a lot of people will say, I'm not allowed to use animations, okay? And there's very good reason why companies say, we do not want you to use animations. If you go into a presentation and you decide you're going to have your text come in, and there's a lot of different ways, obviously, the PowerPoint allows you to do this. You can have it motion so it basically looks like some kind of bee that's trying to land on a flower. And if you're trying to do that and you're trying to focus on this information, first of all, it's going to distract exactly from what people are thinking about and what they're trying to do or what you're trying to get across to them, rather than focusing on the actual content. And that's why a lot of businesses say, no, we don't want any animations. So again, it does kind of limit you in what kind of information you're able to pull up. Okay. The other key thing that you really have to think about when you're using PowerPoint is that it's really, really easy to go ahead and give people way, way, way too much information. If you think about it, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, if you were to go in and have a spreadsheet directly in your PowerPoint, people are going to lose their minds trying to figure out exactly what kind of information you want. Because if you think about it, you don't necessarily just want to put in that kind of information. You don't want to put that kind of detail into a PowerPoint. You're better off being able to summarize the information. So when you go in there and you have all of this text that you want to be able to go ahead and use, there's a lot of different things that kind of go into that. So you have to make sure that you're using the information that you have. Okay. So what exactly can you do about it? So now I have my little friendly shark down here. This is one of the really cool things that you do have with PowerPoint now, especially with the Office 365 version. You can incorporate not only animations, but you can have them do all kinds of things. And this one, it just kind of allows you to see a swimming shark. One of the key things that you want to do, and I've already mentioned about the fact that when you add in a lot of information inside of PowerPoint, people are going to start really kind of getting overloaded with all of the information. The easiest way to avoid something like that is to use bullet points. There is nothing worse, and some of you will probably agree with me on this, there is nothing worse than sitting through an online presentation where somebody reads the slide directly to you word for word. The more that happens, the more you're going to end up tuning out your audience. So it's a really good way to go ahead and make sure that rather than just, like I said, reading it word for word, summarize the information in a quick bullet point and expound on the bullet point. Make sure, obviously, that you know what you're talking about, but give it the opportunity so that you understand exactly what kind of information you're trying to get across. I mentioned a minute ago about the animations that you can go ahead and use. Now, obviously, I have my little shark here. It's nice to be able to go ahead and do a lot of different things. But there's other things that you can work with in some animations as well. You know, as you go through and you're giving your presentation, if you put up all of the information that you're trying to get across on your slide at one time, people are going to read through that, and then they're going to kind of tend to tune out a little bit. So rather than just saying, okay, well, not using any animation, you don't want to go crazy. You don't want to go ahead and put in something ridiculously awful so that you're, like I said, people are going to focus more on the way the content is coming in than the content in your presentation. But the animation that I use here is called fade. It basically just fades your content in. Okay? There's another one called appear. It allows you to do things one at a time and present your information one item at a time. The more that you are able to do that, the more engaged everybody in your audience is going to be. They're going to be waiting for that next piece of information. So make sure that while obviously you're going to have limitations, you can use animations at least a little bit so that you're not just throwing everything at one person. And then, like I said, people might end up getting lost because they read the slide first and then they just kind of tune out for a minute. The more you can go ahead and do something like this and let the information come in one item at a time, it makes it a little bit easier to keep everybody engaged. Obviously, I can put a lot of bullet points in here, and I could put all kinds of text in here to make sure that everybody's getting what they need to. But sometimes it helps just to have a little bit more. For example, if you are trying to display specific types of information, don't necessarily just say, oh, well, here's your bullet point. Pull something in. Pull in a screenshot. Pull in a website. Pull in other types of options. I don't have to just simply require my PowerPoint to do all the work for me. If I want, for example, to be able to go in and open up, let's say, Microsoft Teams, if I just want to go ahead and pull it over here, I can pull over Microsoft Teams and just go ahead and keep displaying, even though it shows that my screen is really displaying just the PowerPoint. If I want to go ahead and pull something over, hey, guess what? There's Microsoft Teams. Now I can go through here and I can pull up all kinds of information that may make it a little bit easier for me. And then when I'm done, if I just want to come back in here to my presentation, I'm back in my presentation. Like I said, it allows you to go ahead and make sure that people aren't just focused on the presentation, they're focused on the content. Okay. Here's another thing I mentioned before about people reading PowerPoints word for word, and that can be really annoying. But you can have all the content in the world. The more, however, that you focus on just reading the words, the more it's going to be dull. Feel like that you have a stake in your presentation. Make it feel like you're in front of the person. And that's one of the key things that people realize, whether you're in a one-on-one meeting, whether you're in front of a camera like this, people think it's not really that personal. Make it personal. Feel like establish a rapport with your audience, because the more you do that, the more you're going to have the ability to connect with them, and then they're going to want to be able to connect with you. And again, if you do something like that in a monotone sort of voice, they're not going to be very interested. You don't want that, obviously, okay? And I'm not saying you have to jump up and down and do tricks, but you have to have some confidence and you have to have some enthusiasm for your topic to make sure that you're getting the right kind of information through. So don't rely just on the animations that you can put on your screen, because they might be wonderful, but you may not even be allowed to use them. And even if you do, it distracts from the information that you're trying to get across to people. So make sure that you're going to be not really the focus per se, but make sure that the content that you're getting across is the focus, not the PowerPoint and not your monotone. Okay. Here's another option for you. Okay. You think about this, and people say when you're going online, people say, I want to go ahead and I want you to turn your camera on. The first thing a lot of people will say is, oh man, I don't want to have to turn my camera on. I hate looking at cameras. I don't want to do this, and I don't want to have to look at myself. There's a lot of different things that are kind of going in on this. Well, and people think that, this is something completely new. I don't want to have to worry about having this completely new setup where I'm not going in and working on this information. I want to have it set up so that maybe I'm displaying the right kind of information. And besides that, we've only been working on Teams, maybe even, or Zoom or wherever. We've only been doing this since, March, since all this started with with working at home. Okay. Well, if you think about it, online content and online presentations, they've been going on for dozens and dozens of years. Think about it. What do you do a lot of times in the evening when you're trying to figure out what's going on in the world? You turn on the news. And that's exactly what's going on. The newscaster is looking at the camera and they're reading their content. Now, like I said, unless you have some kind of wonderful tool and you have a lot of money where you can afford a teleprompter, you still need to know the content that you're trying to deliver. But if you go ahead and you just look at the camera, it makes it a lot easier. Again, the more engaged you are, the easier it's going to be for your audience to get your information. Okay? What's one of the key things that you do when you're trying to give or trying to sell something to a client? Okay? Eye contact. That's one of the most common things that you hear. The more eye contact you have, the more engaged they are. If you're looking over here, if you're looking up at your screen, or you're trying to look down here and look at your notes, or if you're looking down here and trying to figure out exactly what's going on, you're not paying attention to them. Okay? You're paying attention to yourself. Make sure that your audience feels like you are paying attention to them. Okay? So now I'm just going to go ahead and have my shark swim away. The other thing that I want to go ahead and point out to you, there are certain tools that you can go ahead and work with, even if I'm using my PowerPoint. Right? There is a tool that is available, and I'll just go ahead and type it in here really quickly. Okay? It's called Zoom It. Okay? Zoom It is a tool that you can download onto your computer. Very, very small download. You can pull it in pretty much wherever you want. But the nice thing is, it gives you, as you can see, it gives you the opportunity to go ahead and type on your screen. If you need to be able to go ahead and zoom in on your screen, here's my little shark over here. I can draw on my screen. There's a lot of different things that I can go ahead and use by using this Zoom It tool. If you're interested in that, again, it's not necessarily just a Microsoft download. You can go into Google, because let's face it, Google knows all, right? You can go into Google and type in that word, Zoom It. It's a very small download. It's not even like a full meg. It's like 790K, but that gives you the opportunity where you can just use your keyboard, you can zoom in on your screen, you can pull attention to the specific types of data that you're looking for and make sure that you're accessing everything in that regard. So I've gone through the ability to go ahead and use PowerPoint. There's another alternative that a lot of people are really not familiar with, okay? And it's called Microsoft Sway. It is a part of the Microsoft 365 suite. It used to be called Office 365. I'm trying to make sure that I get out of the habit of using Office 365 because it is now Microsoft 365. But anyway, Sway is an online program that you can go in and create online presentations. The nice thing about it, as I said, it's going to be done completely online. So when you create a quote unquote sway, what you're doing is you're creating it online. It's nothing that you're going to download. So if you have access to the internet, you have the ability to go in and start using all kinds of different features that are associated with this. And you can just keep it directly in your Microsoft 365 location, whether you store it in a OneDrive account or if you just simply keep it inside of Sway. That way it's going to be easy to go ahead and pull up. Inside of Sway, what happened, the difference between this and PowerPoint is when you're creating a PowerPoint presentation, you have what are referred to as slides, and that's just each item that you want to be able to go ahead and work with. In Sway, you create what are referred to as cards, and a card gives you the ability to display a lot of different types of information. So for example, if I wanted to go in here and I wanted to go ahead and get this information set up, again, this is a really good way to go ahead and do this online, but it's also a really good way as long as you have the information, as long as you have an internet connection, there's a lot of different things that you can go ahead and work with there and go ahead and give your presentation really, really quickly. Okay. And this is just an example. You can see some of the different screens that pop up there. Over on the left-hand side of each one of those, you can simply click in, and my apologies, I was trying to come up with some kind of catchy logo or catchy slogan for the city of Pittsburgh, but you know, that's why I'm not in marketing. But anyway, you can go in and you can see that you can add in pictures, you can use those as background, and then you also have the ability to add in specific pieces of text. Now, you can go in, you can add the text, you can make it bold, you can italicize it, you can make it really stand out, but also kind of contrast it with the background pictures that you have in there. It makes it a lot easier to go ahead and set that up. So there's different tools that you have that you can go ahead and work with in that regard. Another thing that you want to make sure that you're doing when you're going through and you're getting all of your information set up in your presentation, like I said, I can sit here and talk for hours and hours and hours about how you can have an engaging presentation. But how do you know whether or not people are engaged? Well, one of the easiest ways is to make sure that you get people involved. Just me simply asking whether or not you guys can hear me. That's a way to go ahead and get involved. You know, there's a lot of different things that you want to be able to go ahead and do, but if people aren't paying attention to you, it's really not going to go ahead and make sense. I mentioned before, like I said, a lot of times with Zoom features, you'll have the ability inside of a meeting where you can give a thumbs up or you can give a thumbs down, okay? Or you can say yes or no. You have the chat window. There's a lot of different things that you can go ahead and incorporate in there. The more you get people to add in your contents, and by the way, as I'm talking about this, obviously, if you do have any questions while I'm talking, feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat window. I have no problem with that. I mean, that's really kind of the most important thing. You have to be responsive to the people that you're giving the presentation to. If you're not, then people aren't really going to want to pay attention to you. So what kinds of things can you go ahead and use? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can survey your audience. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go ahead and do that. Again, there's a feature in Microsoft 365 called Forms that allows you to go ahead and create surveys. And then as you create the survey, you can simply go ahead and read the content, allow people to answer it, and then those answers come into you, and then you can check the results on them. There's a lot of different ways that you can incorporate something like that. We have the chat window. It's basically the same thing as comments. So the more you request people to say, hey, what kind of thoughts do you have on this? What kind of options are you worried about? What kind of information are you looking for? The more you try and draw them in, the less chance that they're going to just say, oh, well, I didn't know what he was talking about, so I didn't bother paying attention. If they have a question, they need to feel comfortable asking it. So the more you go ahead and do something like that, and the more you encourage it, the better off you're going to be, and the more engaged you're going to feel, and the more engaged they're going to feel as well. Once again, when you ask, you can go ahead and say, okay, what do you have any questions? You think about that, and people think, no, not really. Okay. Ask open-ended questions, right? Especially when you're trying to communicate with a group of people. And that's really, I mean, it's something that you don't necessarily just have to do online, but it's a lot easier to get people involved when you get something a little bit more than a yes or no in response. Okay? So one of the things that I personally do every time I'm giving or teaching a class, I will ask throughout the class, I will say, what kind of questions do you have? Now, that may seem like a very subtle difference in do you have any questions, but it forces people to think about it and say, wait a second, well, what kind of question? That's not do I have any questions? That's a little bit different. So now I think about this for a second. I think, well, yes, I do have a question. This is kind of what I'm trying to trying to talk about. So you have the ability to go ahead and give that information and get them to give you those questions so that you can go ahead and answer it. Now, having said that, obviously that kind of gets back to what I spoke about at the very beginning of the presentation, which is make sure that you know your topic, because somebody throws a question at you, nothing is going to destroy your credibility more than, I don't really know. You have to make sure that you know exactly what you're talking about and know your subject thoroughly. Even if, now, does that mean that you may not run into a situation where somebody does throw a curveball at you? Well, yeah, I mean, that can happen. If that does happen, you have to promise, say, okay, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I can always go ahead and find out for you and get back to you. Promise that you will get back to them and then follow through. Because if you don't follow through, they're just going to think, oh, the person wasn't paying attention. Why should I pay any attention to what he said? So it's a really, really important thought process to make sure that you're getting all of this information in here. Okay. Another key thing that you might want to think about, I've already talked about the process of going in and watching for information overload. Okay, you don't want to do that, because the more information you're trying to give people, the more they're going to end up tuning out. Okay, one of the key things to remember about this, there's that old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there's a reason behind it. Okay, especially when you're trying to give a presentation like this. The more that you can put something into a graphic, the easier it is going to be for your audience to digest it. Okay, especially because as you go through and people are looking and watching your presentation, their eyes are able to go ahead and focus on one specific piece of item at a time, or one item at a time. Now, if that happens, that's fine, but you can go in and you can make sure that they know exactly what they should be focusing on. I mentioned about bringing a spreadsheet up on your presentation. If you were to do that, that's the easiest way to start hearing foreheads hitting the desk because people are falling asleep. But if you can give it a graphic, the human eye recognizes graphics a lot more quickly than they recognize words or numbers. Okay. Additionally, when you're going in and you want to be able to go ahead and give something like that, make sure that you summarize the data more than you give detail, because you can just absolutely drown people in detail. The more you do that, the more they're going to kind of fade out and really not pay attention. But if you're able to go ahead and quickly summarize all of your information, it makes it a whole lot easier and it makes it a lot more engaging so that you can work with that. Also, make sure that you're getting the most important information out there as well. You don't necessarily just want to put in, here's this piece of information. Okay, here's this piece of information. This is really, really important. I need you to focus on this. And then you go in and you give a couple more pieces of information. You want to make sure that the most important information is given as quickly as possible, because the more you do that, once again, people aren't going to really have to focus on all the minor details. You can simply go in there and give that kind of information as have it set up. Okay. Now, the other key thing with that, it's not just using charts. Yes, charts, when you're trying to discuss numbers, are really, really handy to go ahead and make sure that you understand exactly what's going on. You can summarize your data. But it's really easy to go ahead and at least give some kind of number. Let me go ahead and pull up a little spread or a little chart here. It's not even just a chart. This is a report that I have run that comes from Power BI. Yes, it's another Microsoft product, but there's a lot of programs out there like Tableau, Power BI, Click. There's a lot of different types of reporting services that are out there. Now, yes, you can see that there are a variety of charts on here. You can see there's all kinds of information related to our instructors. Okay. And there's a timeline up there, and there's what's referred to as a slicer up in the top left. So you can pick and choose exactly what kind of information you want to see. But over on the left-hand side, you see how those numbers pop in. They're not there just as decoration. Okay. Rather than just putting in spreadsheets and showing a grand total down at the bottom of the spreadsheet, why not just show the main number that you're trying to get across? So if I'm looking for average instructor score for the month of August, boom, there it is, 9.76. Now, if I want to go ahead and break that down, sure, I can get all kinds of details and work from there and see how everybody's doing. But there's a lot of different things that are incorporated into this to make sure that you can go ahead and access the information that you need. Another key piece of information that you want to make sure of. I mentioned earlier that some people, when they go into a presentation, they want to feel like they come away with some sort of parting gift, okay? And again, there's all kinds of ways that you can go ahead and do this. Depending upon the type of platform that you're using, there are different ways to go ahead and get people information, okay? So some of the different platforms that people use for sharing out your content. The most common these days seems to be OneDrive, okay? And again, OneDrive gives you the opportunity to put a file in a location where you can say, yes, it's my files, I have them secured. Or you can go in and you can say, hey, this file may need to be sent out to somebody else. Here's the thing. If you just send a file, kind of like what you do when you email a file to somebody, now you have two competing files with it. Now, again, maybe your company restricts what you're allowed to quote unquote share, but if you're able to go ahead and share your content out, that makes it a little bit easier because now you have one centralized copy. And if you want to be able to go ahead and make sure that people have the most up-to-date information, now they can go ahead and share that out as well. So that's kind of a screen of what you're going to see. Just as an example from OneDrive, you can go in there, you can access your files, you can share out your files. There's a lot of different tools that you can go ahead and work with and open up and work with your different folders. You also have programs like Dropbox or Box. Again, they're a little bit more public. They are free. OneDrive is also, you have a free option with OneDrive as well. So if you want to be able to go ahead and share out information, you can use a lot of these different tools, and Google Docs is the same way. You can simply go in there, share out whatever kind of information is going to be most relevant, and then once again, that means that everybody's focused on one document. Okay? The really nice thing about OneDrive, Google Docs, that sort of thing, is the fact that it also allows people to go in and use a feature called co-authoring. So again, if you've never seen co-authoring before, it allows multiple people to edit a document at the same time. And it's, like I said, it's kind of creepy the first time you see it because you might be typing something down below, and then all of a sudden you'll see a cursor that pops up the top of the screen, maybe with somebody's initials or their picture or something like that. And then as you're typing something in down below, they're typing in something completely different up above. And like I said, it's a little bit unsettling the first time you see it, but it does give you the opportunity, once you're used to it, to go ahead and get that information and work really, really easily. Okay. Also, if you want to be able to just share files in Teams, if you're working in Teams, if that's what your company uses, it allows you to go ahead and share all kinds of files to make sure you're accessing what you need to. Okay. Also, you want to make sure that you have the specific platform that you're working with and make sure that you know what platform that is. Again, there's a lot of different ones out there. Obviously, in this case, we're using Zoom. You may have Teams that you want to be able to work with, or you may be working with WebEx. Any one of those three have a variety of different tools that you're going to be able to use. Make sure that you understand the concepts behind them. Make sure that you understand the tools that you can go ahead and use, not only to present your information, excuse me, but also to make sure that people can engage with you. Right? If I give somebody the ability to go ahead and use their microphone, what is that going to do? If I allow people to go ahead and type in questions, what is that going to do to the flow of my conversation? Am I going to be able to go ahead and do other things? You know, there's another program that we use for a lot of our classes called Adobe Connect, which again gives us the ability to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It allows people to go ahead and react. It allows people to raise their hand virtually so that we can get attention. And obviously, you also have the ability to go ahead and give a lot in the way of information out so that everybody's going to be able to access all of that. So in this case, what I did was I brought up a screen that allows you to see some of the different options associated with a Teams meeting. Now, again, you can see in the middle there's a little section that says gallery, but also you have what's called large gallery. So if you have more than, let's say, 10 people, you can choose a large gallery, and then it'll give you the opportunity to see everybody's camera there. Okay, so if everybody has their cameras on, you can see that. The other thing is you have what's referred to as together mode, kind of puts everybody in a little classroom so that you can see everybody in the same vein. So there's a lot of different tools that you can go ahead and use to make sure that you can go ahead and incorporate that. The one other thing I do want to think about with that, especially if it is a virtual presentation, keep in mind the more virtual or the more people you have that have their cameras on in your presentation, the slower your connection is going to run and the slower everything is going to be throughout your presentation. Okay. All right, so that's basically what I have for you. One other thing I want to go ahead and at least remind you of before we go ahead and open this up to questions. If you do have an interest in this, we are offering classes for what we call our Center for Leadership and Development, and we also offer our Workplace Fundamentals class. Workplace Fundamentals are basic things like sexual harassment, soft skills, those kinds of things that are going to be available. The CLD, or the Center for Leadership and Development, those are classes kind of geared more toward supervisors, managers, even CEO level officers, where you can go in and you're getting a lot more information. It's not just sitting in a class and listening to an instructor. It's really kind of getting deep down in. So if you are interested, New Horizons is offering kind of a buy one, get one. So one person attends the class, another one can attend for free. Okay. If you are interested, I have Dennis's information down below there. But thank you all for attending. And now, like I said, if you have any questions, by all means, feel free to go ahead and use the chat window, or if you have your microphones, feel free to do that as well. Okay.
Great. Well, thanks, Jeff. Yes, if anybody has any questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A or the chat. You did a great job, Jeff. That was a lot of great information to help us all. So
thank you.
Everybody's taking all their notes and getting their presentations put together right now.
Okay.
Thank you to all of our viewers for joining us for today's webinar. And thank you, Jeff, for sharing these valuable tips so that we can all prepare engaging presentations. For those of you who registered for today's webinar, you'll receive the PowerPoint in an email. And then look for our recorded webinar to be on our website within a week. We usually try to get those archived on the website. So we want to get you looking for that if you want to refer back to anything from this valuable information. We also want to thank CompFi, which is formerly Computer Fellows Incorporated, for sponsoring our technology webinar series. And we want to remind you to join us next Wednesday, that's September 23rd at 11 a.m. for Behavioral Styles and Remote Work. So you'll find all the details and registration on our website. And again, this is your last opportunity. If you have any questions, well, you have Jeff right here to answer them. Other than that, I say thank you to all. Have a productive rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.